Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers and sisters,
welcome in How to Perform Umrah and Hajj, a series of video lectures by A.M. Baloch from Mufakirin. Episode number 11, Violations.
Please subscribe to this channel and hit the bell button so you get a notification every time I post a new video. If you have already subscribed, thank you very much. Hit the thumbs up button if you like this video, or hit the thumbs down button if you don't like this video. What do you think about this video? Let me know in the comments. Now let's move to the main episode.
In this episode we will talk about various violations and fidyah regarding those violations. So let's move in. Mistakes and violations of acts or rights and prohibitions require expiation or fidyah. Fidyah becomes obligatory or wajib in three conditions: violation of prohibition of Ihram, failing to perform obligatory acts of Umrah or Hajj, transgressing the sanctity of the haram. In these three conditions, the fidyah becomes wajib. There are three types of fidyah depending on the type of violation. Badana is offering a large sacrificial animal, is that a cow or camel. A Damm is offering a small sacrificial animal like a sheep or goat. Sadqa is offering a charity to poor like flour, wheat, barley, dates or raisins. There are subtypes of Sadqa. The complete Sadqa al-Fitr, which is equal to 3 kg of wheat or 6 kg of barley or dates or raisins, or their equivalent money, which is a Sadqa al-Fitr, same like we give Sadqa al-Fitr during the Ramadan. And less than Sadqa al-Fitr, this can be handful of wheat or equivalent, and Sadqa becomes equivalent to the value. For example, if you have cut a tree, you pay the equivalent of the value, whatever is agreed for that. Or if you cut the grass, it's equivalent of that grass. If you did something in the boundaries of haram where it's prohibited to cut trees, plants, etc., so the sadqa will be equivalent value of whatever the loss you have done or the damage you have done. But less than sadqa is a handful of wheat, and Sadqa al-Fitr is the equal Sadqa al-Fitr, which is a 3 kg of wheat or 6 kg of barley or dates or raisins, or equivalent of the value. Depending on the penalty, the highest fidyah will be badana, which is a big animal, camel or cow. Damm will be the small sheep or goat, or sadqa, full sadqa al-Fitr. Less than Sadqa Fitr, which is a handful, and just Sadqa will be equivalent to the damage you have done. So violation, first we will start from the miqat. If you miss to enter in the Ihram from the miqat, there is a Damm on you to pay fidyah. But if you go back and assume your Ihram from the miqat, then this is exempted. You are not supposed to pay them. But let's say people who are flying and they miss the miqat, it's difficult for them unless they go and locate from which miqat they were entering, and they have to go to the same miqat and assume the ihram. So you were in the air and you missed. Then now, instead of going back and doing, which may not be practical, then you have to pay the Damm. Damm is giving a small sacrificial animal, which is a goat or sheep. And if you have applied fragrances to the body, then it depends on the act. If you apply perfume or fragrance, tissue or any large area of the body, even for movement without a valid reason, you have to pay the Damm. If you have put on the small part of the body like finger, nose, etc., then you have to pay a Sadqa al-Fitr. If you have applied large quantity on the large amount, this is how it works: large quantity on large area of body, Damm. If small quantity on small area of the body like finger or nose, Sadqatul Fitr. If you have applied fragrant substances like shampoo, soap, etc. on the body, then there's the three. You have to pay the Damm, you have to give the Sadqatul Fitr, and then you have to fast for 3 days. If you use fragrance on different places, like different places of the location, like in Makkah, in Mina, in Muzdalifah, so that you have to pay for each site where you did this violation. If you did in haram, you have to pay let's say in hotel, if you used fragrance in hotel, you have to pay a Damm for hotel, and then again you repeated this in the mina, you have to pay for the mina. If you repeat it again, so every time you repeat this, you have to pay for each time. That's what it means. And applying fragrances to clothes, if you apply fragrance to the clothes more than 12 hours, then it's a Damm. If less than 12 hours, it's a Sadqatul Fitr. And if you are wearing the inscented and dyed clothing, then you have to pay Damm. If the quantity was more than or it was the time was more than 12 hours, it's a Damm. If the quantity was less or the time was less than 12 hours, then Sadqatul Fitr. Fragrance from Holy Kaaba. If you go put your hands on Hijr Aswad or on the walls of the Kaaba, and you get the scent on your hands, you have to pay the Damm. So that's why be careful when you are in the condition of Ihram. Avoid touching those places which has a scent or ethers on them. Using the scented products, if you use soap, shampoo or other fragrances, then you have to pay the Damm. If applying henna or kahl, then if it's more than 12 hours, you have to pay Damm. If it's thickly applied, you have to pay thickly applied for more than 12 hours, you have to pay 2 Damms. If it's thickly applied but less than 12 hours, you pay 1 Damm and 1 Sadqatul Fitr. If it's thinly applied and less than 12, then only 1 Damm you have to pay. And if you apply a henna for whole palm, it's a Damm. If you apply scented kohl once or twice, then it's a Damm again. So you have to be careful to use these things while you are in the Ihram. Wearing stitched clothes for men, women can wear the stitched clothes, but the men, if they wear for less than 12 hours, they give a Sadqatul Fitr. If they wear for more than 12 hours, they have to pay Damm. And if you wear a footwear which is covering the front top bone of your foot, then and it's up more than 12 hours, you have to pay Damm. If it's less than 12 hours, Sadqatul Fitr is due on you. Covering the head or face, for the man covering head or for the woman covering the face. So if a head or face is covered for more than 12 hours, Damm is required. If it's less than a quarter of the face and it's less than 12 hours, Sadqatul Fitr. If it's more than quarter and more than 12 hours, then it's a Damm. And for the woman who covered the whole face for more than 12 hours, it will be Damm. If it's less than half face covered and less than 12, Sadqatul Fitr is required. If the face is covered by Muharram, even if someone else is covered while the woman is sleeping, then again in that situation a Damm is required. If face becomes covered accidentally while sleeping, Sadqatul Fitr is required. If man shaves, cuts or removes hair, or even women shaves, cuts or removes the hair, Damm is required. Removing quarter or more of the hairs of the head, beard, then it's a Damm. If it's less than quarter, it's a Sadqatul Fitr. If removing hair from one or both of the armpits or below the navel, Damm is required. If the less than this amount, then Sadqatul Fitr if you remove the hair from the chest, thigh, ankle, shoulder, or upper or lower lips, and Sadqatul Fitr. If 3 or less strands of hair fall out while scratching, touching the head, or removing, or due to other reasons, if it, not accidentally, but if you are scratching or doing something and hairs, more than 3 hairs comes, you have to pay Sadqa, which is a handful of wheat. And then if you remove the hair from different areas of body at the different times or places, for each incident you have to pay the fidyah, penalty for each. For a woman to remove a fingertip length of hairs, Damm is required. Fingertip, which is 1 inch, about 1 inch, to remove hair outside the boundary of the haram. Even if you are outside of the haram and you are still in Ihram, you have to pay them. To remove quarter of the hairs before its due time, before sa'i or sa'i of Umrah, or before the Hadi of Hajj, then you have to pay the Damm. To cut the hair after Rami but before Hadi, for those performing Hajj Tamattu and Hajj al-Qiran, it's a Damm. But if you are performing Hajj Ifrad, then it's no. To delay cutting the hair until after sunset of 12, it's a Damm. A Muharram cutting hair of non-Muharram, Sadqa for Muharram. And likewise, if you clip the nails of both hands or both feet, it's a Sadqa. Even if you cut one hand, one feet, it's a Sadqa. If you clip less than 5, then Sadqatul Fitr for each nail which you cut. And then sexual relations, if you have a sexual relation, whether intentionally or forgetfully, after coming into Ihram for Hajj and before Waqoof in Arafaat, it's a Damm, and Hajj is nullified and must be repeated. So this is a severe penalty. If you by mistake or knowingly you do this act, your Hajj will be invalid. If you kiss, touch or embrace a person of opposite gender with the desire or lust, Damm is required but Hajj is valid. If you masturbate, then Damm will be required but Hajj will be valid. To have a sexual relation at any point between Waqoof and Arafat and before cutting the hair, you have to pay the highest penalty, but then the large animal, cow or camel. Hajj is still valid. To have a sexual relation at any point between Waqoof and Arafat and before Tawaf Ziyara, again, badaniyan you have to pay. Hajj will be valid, but you have to pay maximum penalty. To have sexual relations after cutting the hair but before Tawaf Ziyara, still Damm will be required and Hajj will be valid. To have a sexual relation before starting Tawaf or Umrah, Damm will be required. Umrah will be nullified and must be restored. So let's say you put the Ihram and you are in the state of Ihram. You have assumed the Ihram but not performed the Tawaf, and then you the sexual act with your wife, and then the both of you do your Umrah. This Umrah is not accepted, this is nullified. You have to again assume the Ihram and perform. There are certain rules to be followed and conditions of the prohibitions of the Ihram to be followed, and certain rules within the haram to be followed. So be careful because Satan is around always, so be careful. Do not indulge in such acts during this Umrah and Hajj time until you are free from the Ihram. If you have a sexual relation before completing 4 circles of Tawaf, and then Umrah will be nullified, must be repeated. If you have then after 4 circles, then the Umrah will be valid but Damm has to be paid. If you have sexual relation completing Tawaf and Sa'i of Umrah but before cutting the hair, then Umrah is still valid but Damm has to be paid. For a Qiran, someone performing Hajj al-Qiran, combine Hajj and Umrah to have sexual relations after Tawaf al-Umrah and Waqoof in Arafat, but before halaq, taqsir and Tawaf Ziyara, one badniya and one damm is due. Hajj and Umrah is still valid. Okay. For Qiran to have sexual relations after Tawaf al-Umrah but before Waqoof and Arafat, 2 dams are required and Hajj is nullified, must be repeated. So the hardest Hajj is Hajj Qiran. The easiest Hajj is Hajj Ifrad. And the moderate Hajj is Hajj Tamattu, where you perform the Umrah, then you come out of the Ihram and then you again assume Ihram for the Hajj. So in between you are allowed, but not in Hajj Qiran, where you have a one Ihram for the Umrah and the same Ihram for the Hajj. So that's the most difficult Hajj. Those brothers and sisters who are performing Hajj Qiran must be more careful, and all should be careful when they are in the state of Ihram. To enter Ihram for Umrah or Hajj in a state of Janabat, major impurity. If you didn't perform ghusl and you come into Ihram, Hajj and Umrah nullified and must be repeated. So it's required to have a ghusl before you assume Ihram. Because if there is a major impurity, your Hajj and Umrah will not be accepted. Do not miss this chance. Take a proper ghusl before assuming Ihram. Killing lice and locusts. To kill more than 3 lice or locusts, Sadqatul Fitr. If 3 are killed, a handful of wheat can be given as a sadqa. If more than 3, Sadqatul Fitr. Tawaf al-Umrah. To perform even one round in a state of major impurity, requiring ghusl in the state of menstruation or without wudu. So you should not be impure, you should have done wudu, and if you are a woman, you should not have periods. If you are in this condition, your Umrah will not be acceptable and you have to pay them. Be mindful. To use a conveyance such as a wheelchair for 4 or more circuits without a valid reason, the penalty will be waived if you do Tawaf again. So like if you are young, you are healthy, but you want to use a wheelchair to perform your Tawaf, and then you have to pay a Damm. Using a conveyance or a wheelchair is only for those who are weak, old, or are not able to walk. To omit this Tawaf completely, if you omit the Tawaf completely, Damm is required. And to complete the Umrah and thereafter coming into Ihram for another Umrah without cutting or shaving the hair, Damm is required. When you finish the Umrah, you have to cut the hairs to come out of Ihram. And you cannot come out of Ihram if you are in the Hajj Qiran. So you perform the Umrah and then you wait for the Hajj. So if you are doing and following this and you go and cut, do not do that one. Read this carefully, the penalties and expiations. To perform this Tawaf without wudu, Sadqa al-Fitr for each round. If you are doing the Tawaf and it's without wudu, for each round you have to pay Sadqa al-Fitr, or perform wudu and then perform your Tawaf again. To omit 1, 2 or 3 circuits without a valid reason, Sadqa al-Fitr for each round. To omit 4 or more circuits without a valid reason, Damm. To perform the Tawaf in a state of major impurity, Damm. The penalty will be waived if the Tawaf is repeated and performed in a state of purity, which is a wudu, and you had ghusl before assuming Ihram. Tawaf al-Nafl. If you are performing Tawaf al-Nafl, to perform less than 4 rounds without wudu, Sadqa for each round. To perform the entire Tawaf or more than 4 rounds without wudu, Damm is required. To omit 1, 2 or 3 rounds without valid reason, Sadqa for each round. To omit 4 or more rounds without a valid reason, Damm is required. To use a conveyance such as wheelchair without a valid reason, Damm is required. To expose the aura to the extent that Salah would not be valid if permitted in this state, Sadqatul Fitr. So in Tawaf Nafl, or in any other tawaf than the Tawaf Qudoom, you are not supposed to expose your shoulder. If you expose your shoulder, Sadqatul Fitr is required. Walking through the Hatim while performing Umrah. When you are performing Umrah, go out of the Hatim. Do not come inside the Hatim. If you come, Sadqatul Fitra is required. Tawaf Ziyara, to delay Tawaf Ziyara until after sunset of 12 of Dhul Hajj without a valid reason, Damm is required. To perform less than 4 circuits without wuzu or 4 rounds, Sadqatul Fitr for each round. To perform the entire Tawaf or more than 4 rounds without wuzu, Damm is required. To omit 1, 2 or 3 rounds without valid reason, Sadqatul Fitr for each round. To omit 4 or more rounds without a valid reason, Damm is required. Tawaf Ziyara, perform the Tawaf in a state of major impurity, Badanna is required. And to have a sexual relations including kissing, touching with the desire after cutting the hair but before Tawaf Ziyara, Damm is required. But Hajj will be valid. This is regarding with the Hajj. When you have a Tahallul al-Asghar but not a Tahallul al-Akbar, so Damm will be required. To use conveyance such as wheelchair for 4 or more rounds without a valid reason, Damm will be required. To expose the aura, even if this is the shoulder, then Damm is required. Walking through Hatim while performing Tawaf, Damm is required. Tawaf Wida, to omit the Tawaf entirely, Damm is required. Penalty will be waived if you go to the Miqat, re-enter the Ihram and perform the Tawaf. To perform this Tawaf without wudu, Sadqatul Fitr for each round of the Tawaf. To omit 1, 2 or 3 rounds without valid reason, Sadqatul Fitr for each round. To omit 4 or more circuits without valid reason, Damm is required. To perform Tawaf in a state of major impurity, Damm is required. Sahi of Hajj and Umrah. To omit all 7 circuits without a valid reason, Damm will be required. To omit 4 or more rounds of the Sahi without valid reason, Damm will be required. Less than 4 rounds omitted, Sadqatul Fitr for each round. If you use a conveyance like a wheelchair without reason, Damm is required. To use a conveyance such as wheelchairs midway through the Sa'i without a valid reason, Sadqatul Fitr for each round. And in the mina, if for those performing Hajj Tamattu or Hajj Qiran not follow the correct sequence of rites on the 10th of Dhul Hajj, Damm is required. What is the correct sequence? Do the Rami Jamra Aqaba, the big pillar or big shaitan, and then do the animal sacrifice Hadi, and then trim or shave your hair. If you do not do these in the same sequence, if you are performing Hajj Tamattu or Hajj Qiran, then Damm is required. First tune on the Jamra Aqaba, then animal sacrifice, then trim your hair. If you miss the sequence, Damm is required. Like you cut your hair before sacrifice or you miss the stoning, you have to pay the Damm. To delay the slaughter of the animal until after sunset of 12 Dhul Hajj, you have to pay the Damm. For those performing Hajj Tamattu or Hajj Qiran to be unable to afford the animal sacrifice, fast for 10 days. If you are performing Hajj Qiran or Hajj Tamattu, the Hadi or Qurbani is required. But if you cannot afford, then you have to fast 10 days, 7 days and then 3 days. Total 10 days you have to fast. To trim or shave your hairs outside of the boundary of the haram, then Damm will be required. You are not supposed to leave the haram boundaries before shaving. To delay the cutting of hair until after sunset of 12th Dhul Hajj without a valid reason, Damm again will be required. Day of Arafaat. To leave the boundary of Arafaat for Muzdalifah before sunset on the 9th of Dhul Hajj, Damm will be required. Penalty will be waived if you go back and stay and complete Waqoof Arafaat. To proceed directly from Arafaat to Mina without performing Waqoof in Muzdalifah with no valid reasons, then Damm will be required. If there are the women, children and elderly and infirm, they can go directly to Mina without penalty. But if they can stay, that's a good. Night of Muzdalifah. To arrive at Muzdalifah on the morning of 10th of Dhul Hajj. after sunrise with no valid reason. Like you are supposed to stay night in the Muzdalifah, but if you come in the morning, Damm is required unless a valid reason. To leave the Muzdalifah on 10th of the Hajj before Fajr begins with no valid reason, Damm is required. Penalty will be waived if the person returned to Muzdalifah before Fajr. If the person returns after Fajr, the penalty will remain. So you should not leave the Muzdalifah before Fajr. Rami, to omit the pelting for 1 day or more, Damm is required. Like on the 10th Dhul Hajj, you missed to stone the first Jumrah, Damm will be required. And if another day if you missed, then again Damm will be required. To omit up 3 pebbles when plating the Jumrah al-Uqba on the 10th day, Sadqa al-Fitr. Like you went to perform the Rami, but you missed the stones. So out of 7, you have only throw the 4 stones. Whatever reason you do not have 3 stones, or you left some here or something happened, and again Sadqatul Fitr for each stone you have to pay. To omit up to 10 pebbles on the 11th, 12th or 13th Dhul Hajj, Sadqatul Fitr for each stone. So be careful, keep your stones in excess quantity and carefully perform or cast the stones. So there's no penalty on you. To omit pelting of entire Jumrah on the 11th, 12th or 13th, Sadqatul Fitr for 7 pebbles. To perform Hadi before pelting on the 10th of Dhul Hajj, Damm will be required. To pelting after sunset on the 13th Dhul Hajj, Damm will be required. To pelt on behalf of another person without a valid reason, Damm is required. Like if there is a woman or there is an elderly man or woman, they can appoint an agent to go and pelt and do the Rami for them. But if you are a young and healthy person and you say someone to go and do the stoning on behalf of you, then you have to pay the Damm, because that's not the valid reason. Hunting. So now we are in the transgressing the sanctity of the haram. If you transgress, there will be a penalty. If you do the hunting to kill a prohibited animal, then you have to pay the penalty. To aid in killing of a prohibited animal, example pointing out the animal to a hunter, warrants the same penalty. To cause harm to an animal, such as damaging their limb, cutting off hair, wings, breaking their eggs, etc. Sadqa equivalent to value of injury. And to cause the harm to an animal such that it renders the animal helpless, Sadqa equivalent to the value of the animal. If you cut vegetarian, cutting the vegetation which is not owned by someone, then Sadqa equivalent to the value of vegetation cut. If you cut vegetation which is owned by someone, then Sadqa equivalent to the value of vegetation cut by compensation to the owner equivalent to the value of the vegetation cut. So to cut vegetation which has planted by someone but not owned by the individual, compensation to the planter equivalent to the value of vegetation you have cut. These are the brief about the violations or mistakes and their expiation or the penalties. I hope this was helpful. If you liked this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't like, hit the thumbs down button. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please consider to subscribe and click or touch on the bell button so you get notification every time I put a new video. Till next time, see you. Ma salama.